There is one place on Earth where you can sail a ship directly into an active volcano. From the outside, it looks like an ordinary Antarctic island. Black cliffs, ice, nothing unusual. But there is a gap in that wall of rock, barely 500 meters wide, and it is almost invisible until you are right on top of it. Thread your ship through that gap, and the island opens up and swallows you whole into an enormous hidden lagoon. An American sealer found that gap in 1820, and he named this place Deception Island, because from the sea, it lies to you. Here is what I keep thinking about. It never stopped lying. Every single group of people who ever trusted this island, the sealers, the whalers, and finally the scientists who came to study it, every one of them found out too late what this place really was. In January of 1820, 2 British sealers spotted the island from a distance and sailed past it. 10 months later, an American sealing captain named Nathaniel Palmer came closer, and Palmer saw the gap. He took his little sloop through it. And what he found on the other side did not make sense. The island was hollow. Inside that ring of black cliffs was a sheltered bay almost 10 kilometers across. Calm water, protected on every side from the Southern Ocean. In a part of the world that kills ships for a living, he had just found the safest anchorage in Antarctica. He stayed 2 days exploring it, and he named it Deception, because of how completely the outside of the island had concealed the inside. But Palmer had the deception backwards. He thought the lie was that the island looked solid. The real lie was the harbor itself, because this bay is not a bay. It is a crater. About 10,000 years ago, a volcano stood here, and it detonated in an eruption so large it blew the entire top off the mountain and threw material across 4,500 kilometers. What was left was a ring of rock around a collapsed hole, and the sea poured in through the gap and filled it. That is the harbor. That is the safest place to shelter in Antarctica. The inside of a volcano. They named the entrance Neptune's Bellows, for the way the wind screams through that narrow gap like air through a trumpet. And if that isn't enough, sitting dead in the middle of the channel, 2.5 meters beneath the surface, there is a rock. Raw-in rock. Ships have been tearing their bottoms out on it ever since. The only way into the safest harbor on the continent has a hidden blade in the doorway. The sealers did not care. They came in their dozens, because the fur seals hauled out here by the thousand, and the harbor meant you could work in safety. And in about 5 years, they hunted the seals of these islands to commercial extinction. By 1825, the seals were gone, and so were the sealers. They had taken everything the island had, and they left. For 80 years the crater sat empty. And then, in 1906, a Norwegian captain named Adolphus Andresen brought the whalers in. The same logic applied. The harbor was perfect. Factory ships could anchor in the flat water of the crater and work in weather that would have destroyed them anywhere else. In 1912, a Norwegian company called Hector built a proper shore station on the Black Beach at Whalers Bay, and this place became one of the most important whaling stations in the entire Antarctic. Around 150 men lived and worked here. They built enormous iron boilers to render the blubber down into oil, and huge tanks to hold it, and they installed special equipment to boil the oil out of the bones as well, because nothing was to be wasted. Britain sent a magistrate to sit on this beach and keep order, and one lived here, at the bottom of the world, every season from 1909 to 1931. And in all those years, the island kept trying to tell them what it was. In the summer of 1920 and 21, the water in Whalers Bay started to boil. Not warm, boiling. It got hot enough that it stripped the paint clean off the hulls of the ships anchored in it. 9 years later, an earthquake dropped the entire floor of the harbor by 5 meters in a single event. Nobody left. There was oil to be made. They looked at a bay that had cooked the paint off their ships, and they went back to work. And for a while, this crater was one of the busiest places in the whole Antarctic. In the summer of 1928, an Australian explorer named Hubert Wilkins hauled a monoplane down here, flattened out a strip on the black volcanic sand, and took off. It was the first aeroplane flight ever made in Antarctica. It happened here, on a beach in a volcano, next to a whaling factory. Behind the station, up the black slope, there is a cemetery. They started it in 1908. By the end, there were 35 graves in it, and a memorial stone for 10 more men who were lost at sea and never came back. Only one of their bodies was ever recovered. 45 men died working this crater. And then it ended, not with an eruption, but with a number. In April of 1931, the price of whale oil collapsed, and that was it. The station shut down. 150 men packed what they could carry and sailed out through Neptune's bellows, and they left the rest exactly where it stood. The boilers, the tanks, the boats, the buildings. The island had another trick left, though. 13 years later, in the middle of the Second World War, the British came back in secret on a mission called Operation Tabarin to stake a claim at the bottom of the world. And when they walked up that beach into the dead whaling station, they found the magistrate's house and 2 of the whalers' dormitories still standing, still weatherproof, still perfectly livable, so they moved in. They found some Argentine flags in one of the buildings, threw them out, and raised the Union Jack over the ruins. They called it Base B. It became one of the very first permanent research stations on the continent, and eventually the seed of the British Antarctic Survey. They studied the weather and the rocks. In 1960, they built an aircraft hangar and used that black volcanic beach as a runway, and for years this crater was the center of British flying operations in Antarctica. They were living inside a volcano, and they knew it. Everybody knew Deception Island was volcanic. Everybody also agreed on one thing: the volcano was extinct. Before we dive in, hit subscribe and drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from, because the island had been saving the biggest lie for last. By the end of 1967, the ground had been trembling for 2 months, and the men on the island did the sensible thing. There was a Chilean base here now as well, and the Chileans had a seismologist, so they went and asked him whether they should be worried. He told them it was fine. On the evening of the 4th of December, 1967, a column of smoke went up on the northwest side of the island. The volcano that had been dead for as long as anyone had bothered to think about it was erupting. Out in the water, a brand new island heaved itself up out of the sea with 3 craters on it. The Chileans abandoned their base and ran for Whalers Bay. And then everybody discovered the real problem with sheltering inside a volcano. To rescue them, a ship would have to sail in through Neptune's bellows, into the crater, while the crater was erupting. No captain would do it. Nobody could get in. So they sent helicopters, small ones, and those pilots flew in over the rim of an erupting volcano and lifted people out 2 at a time, 27 Chileans and 8 British, and carried them out to a Chilean Navy ship waiting outside. The following summer, the British went back in and reoccupied Base B, because the eruption was over, obviously. On the 21st of February, 1969, there were 5 men from the British Antarctic Survey living in the old whaling station. At 6:30 in the morning, the first shock hit. The main shock came just after midday, and an eruption opened up at Pendulum Cove, which is not far away at all. The 5 of them ran. They got out of the station huts and started for the evacuation point, and while they were out in the open, the sky began to rain rock. And this is the part I cannot get out of my head. Those 5 men ran to the abandoned whaling huts, the buildings the Norwegians had walked away from 38 years earlier, and they tore sheets of corrugated iron off them. And they held that scrap metal over their heads, and they walked back through a volcanic bombardment underneath the roof of a dead man's hut. The whalers had been gone for 4 decades. Their rubbish saved 5 lives. They made it back to the station. And they found that while they had been out there, a flood of mud and debris carrying blocks of ice had come down off the mountain and swept straight through the middle of the base. Through the rooms they had been standing in that morning, Chilean helicopters lifted them off the island the next day. It was the same ship's helicopters that had rescued the island in 1967. Nobody died. Not in 67, not in 69. Out of everything this island did to the people who trusted it, it never quite managed to kill any of them at the end. But it did take something. The mud flow that ripped the middle out of Biscoe House kept going down the slope, and it went straight through the cemetery. The graves of the men who had died working this bay, 35 of them, and the memorial to the 10 lost at sea, were partly buried and partly washed away. The volcano erased its own dead. Nobody lives on Deception Island now. There are 2 research stations that open in the summer and close again, one Spanish and one Argentine, and no country owns the place. It's governed under the Antarctic Treaty. The volcano is still there. It is officially classed as restless, with significant volcanic risk, and it is watched around the clock. Because the last time everyone was certain about this island, they were wrong. Sometimes the smallest places hold the biggest stories. Whalers Bay is a protected historic site now. The tanks are still standing on the black sand, tilted and rusted through. The hangar is still there. Half of Biscoe House is still missing. And the cruise ships still come, threading the gap through Neptune's bellows exactly the way Nathaniel Palmer did it in 1820, sailing into the calm water in the middle of a mountain that is not finished yet. It has fooled the sealers, and the whalers, and the scientists, and it is still sitting there in the Southern Ocean, looking like an ordinary island. If you've ever heard of Deception Island, or sailed through those cliffs yourself, let me know in the comments, and let me know where I should go next. See you in the next one.